Okay, looks like we're live. So this afternoon we have Brian Hill of the Complete Combatant, and um, I'm not going to give you a gigantic, long, huge introduction because I think that most people, I mean, you, most people that are watching this right now know who you are. Uh, you need no introduction, even though you definitely deserve one. So I'll give you this short, brief, concise introduction. You're the coach I want to be when I grow up.
I'm honored. I'm honored.
I'm honored too. Thanks so much for
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah,
So,
you're definitely on the way, my friend.
thank you so much. So, one of the things that I really want to talk to you about, and that you can give us some insight on, is there's a series of online courses that you recently just started, and I'm super interested. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. The idea came to us that, I travel a lot, but when I'm home, there's still work to be done. And I'm always looking for a good question. I'm not looking for answers. I'm looking for great questions wherever I go. And my question has always been, how effective are our safety rules? And I think as firearms instructors, we can say they're not. As much as we talk about them, as much as we tell people what to do, they still break it. So it decided to look at safety in general. And something that was very interesting is cars are much safer than they used to be. So I wondered if people were safer drivers. It's kind of a comparative analysis for this. And what's actually happened is the more safety you put around a human being, the less safe they become, which I think is interesting. It happens quite frequently. So I looked at other industries that have a good safety record, like aviation, firefighting, things like that. And one thing that really stands out is the practice of what the context of the rules mean consistently. Instead of telling somebody what not to do, give them a chance to practice what to do. Very different. So the idea was to develop drills and skills that give us the contextual basis for how the rules actually work in the real world and what they really mean. We do Cooper's 4 firearm safety rules, but we often say them as a litany against fear when we teach class. We just hope that people won't do these things, yet we see a lot of problems with it. So the idea was to come up with some idea, especially for instructors, to have a practical example of 3 types of ways to practice this rule. And also in the areas where there might be a breakage in this rule, because sometimes we have to break the rules too, which is hard on people, especially rule followers. They have to think outside the box, and it's something that Americans excel at. So the idea was to offer a class where I could do these things.
That's very intriguing
Mhm.
because one of the ways that one of the ways that we typically open dry fire clinics and dry fire
Mhm.
classes is by letting them know that, hey, we're going to have to put our sights on things, and we're going to be pressing triggers.
Mhm.
So that integrates a different layer of risk, and we got to mitigate that risk.
There is always an exception to the rule in the world. Dry fire is an exception. Maintenance is an exception to always treat guns as if they're loaded. And there are times where you have no choice but to point in a direction of least, in consequence, something to think about. It's really important that people know that it's not black and white all the time. It's decisional.
Hmm.
So if I follow a safety procedure in dry fire class, usually what we'll do is 3 steps. I guarantee almost everybody has a 3-step process for that. And the reason for that is triangulation. The mind works on a 3-step process of triangulation. So I know you're in the military, you know a little bit about that. If you only have 2 points of direction, you're lost. So we need 3 steps. It's called the rule of 3. We have to triangulate on it, but we also can only hold about 3 points of data at one time, which makes it really hard for people with safety rules. We're pushing more information in than they can handle at one time. So the practice of a safety check that allows them to go from one step to the next step to the next step, and it verifies it, tends to mitigate a lot of safety concerns. But if it only has 2 checks or 1 check, it becomes a bit of a problem.
Hmm. Well, that's very interesting. Yeah. So having those multiple checks, like multiple layers, that's
Mhm.
interesting. Hmm.
Well,
So
I don't know how you do it, but everybody takes the magazine out, locks the slide to the rear, and then we know that visually you can look at a gun and see that it's empty, but it's not, because it happens all the time. It's happened to some pretty famous firearms instructors where they've said a gun's empty and it hasn't been. So if that can happen, then vision isn't enough. So we tend to take our finger in there and check it. And I look at me, take our finger in there and do a little check with it and see if it's empty. So I feel it, I see it, I've opened it, and it would be great if I had somebody else look and ask them the condition of my weapon instead of asking them if it's unloaded, because we have a biasing issue if we ask them, hey, is this gun empty? Because the mind creates the image of emptiness. And then after that, if we were to rack it 3 times, there's no way that gun can be loaded unless it's a catastrophic problem from the beginning. So it helps us really become safe, and it's not burdensome because it takes all of about 5 or 6 seconds to do correctly.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that class.
Yeah.
Because I think it can help us all out with dry fire, and it can help us all out on the range as instructors. So is this going to be a webinar, or like what format are we looking at here?
Yeah, we're going to do Zoom, and Shelly and I are going to do it together, and it'll be live, and I'm sure we'll offer it up at some point after that for people to tune in. She's really in charge of that side of it. She's got to do all the work there. But we're going to do it, I think, 3 or 4 times a year. We're also going to do the 7 preparatory cues that I teach in class for higher level performance. We're going to talk about 5 intrinsic motivators that people need, and it's kind of an idea to, that's my reputation, is I'm the inner coach, of how to build a shooter that is able to reasonably understand the context and apply it in rapid decisions. If you've ever been in anything that's difficult, like a car wreck or action, there's a stretch to the mind. We call it time dilation, where time is both fast and slow. That means processing's gone way up. That's why it feels slow, but it's fast because the events are moving at the speed of light. So we have to balance this stretch. But when you're in the cold comfort of your home by yourself practicing, you may not feel any stretch at all. So we have to create a little bit of this, John Hearn talks about it, this unconscious competence, the ability to do these things naturally with our hand movements, but also we have to be present mentally as we do it. And the more present we are, the better the reps are, the more important they are. Repetitions mean nothing if you're not present. In fact, they're injurious by nature. So, you shouldn't do a certain number of repetitions. You should do it until you can't pay attention. And what this is trying to do is, from the very first moment we start to practice, we orient the mind to the direction, to the goal. And what that allows the mind to do is start putting procrastination aside, because all humans procrastinate because they're trying to compress the time to make the challenge harder. That's how procrastination works. You're not bad if you procrastinate. You're just compressing your time problem versus information. So when they're practicing, if we can get them present with this kind of ritualistic series of motions and drills that would have to be done anyway, and following the safety rules, it helps them learn a lot. I did it this weekend. I taught rifle class in Florida, and basically I took a bunch of Floridians that are not gunslingers, and by the last day they were able to do in a 3D environment relative to targets they weren't allowed to shoot, all the rules of safety, because it became more intrinsic to them, it became more natural, it became a part of it, and they understood in a deeper level what it meant. We still have mistakes, but it's very useful that way.
Man, not only do those sound like fantastic concepts, but that rifle class sounds pretty amazing too. Yeah.
I love the rifle class, It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. It's good to get after it too. And I just keep asking. I try to find 2 good questions every year as an instructor. Last year was, why can't we teach shot calling? And this year I'm really working on, how can we make the safety rules living so that people understand them, and how can we induce movement in class also?
So let's see. There's another online course that you offer. There's the safety course, and then
Yeah.
what else is there? There's another one that you offer.
Preparatory cueing that we're going to do.
Preparatory
So
queuing.
7 steps. So that sounds real fancy. I guess it's a fancy word, but I was startled when I came into the firearms industry from an athletic background, how little preparation there is for shooting, especially under pressure. They have basically a rabbit's foot and tie your shoelace right, and hopefully it all works out. And then there was also a lot of training that emphasized failure constantly, which there's nothing wrong with that, but failure in training often damages the self-image. And if you don't know you can do something, you won't rise to the occasion. You'll fall to your expectations in that moment. It's incredibly hard. So the preparatory cueing is super interesting, and it's not just for shooting. It's for anything you do, whether you're lifting weights, you do jujitsu, you're a race car driver. It's the same thing. There's these 7 cues that puts the mind on point and allows it to build the self-image of, very importantly, what you can do and also what you're not capable of. I know you find it with students all the time. Either they overestimate how good they can shoot, or they really underestimate it, and then they beat themselves up when it's not perfect. And that's the brain struggling with the self-image constantly. Lanny Basham worked on that a lot. Talked about how important it is to address the self-image and to build it. But if you have no way to get ready to shoot, what you're basically doing is hoping you get lucky. And I see that a
That
lot.
makes sense.
Yeah, especially fast guys. Fast guys. I love training fast people. They're much easier than accuracy driven people in some ways, because their penalty phase is much more difficult because they miss. So they say, well, it's important enough that I hit the target, but they're always told to slow down, which is the wrong input. What they need is a clear go signal. What tells me to shoot this gun sooner? So I never tell them to slow down. I actually get them to speed up. And with accuracy people, they're always looking for perfection, and perfection is just procrastination because it's never going to happen. We're humans. So all we can do is the 10% or 20% of that bell curve that's good enough to shoot. And if you put all the bullets through the same hole, I would submit, especially tactically, that would be a very bad idea. You need to be thinking about it. And then the idea of perfectionism always comes from, you'll be still, the target will be still, that you can put one round on top of each other. But that's not even what the safety rules say. It says be aware of your target and surroundings. So what's happening in the background? Something has to be happening. And we can't have a perfect shot, but we certainly can learn to do good enough. And if we start following these preparatory cueings, it's amazing the brain. We have this exceptional computer that does things that nothing else. It's got more connections than there are stars in the universe. It's incredible, and it can be programmed. And once it's programmed, it becomes powerful. And then you can know exactly what you're capable of, and you can do it on demand. And when you don't do well, you'll know it was either lack of training, or you're simply not good enough for the situation, and that's freeing. And when you do well, you can celebrate, like I like to say in class, like a Viking. You have to feel that joy of, I've done well. And it's difficult. So that course is really good to get people to understand how to get ready to shoot. And it sounds like it's a lot of stuff to do before you shoot, but you're doing something anyway. Here's what I usually see on the line. Tell me if you see this. They're nervous, their hands fidget, they'll touch their gun. They'll have some sort of thing that they do with their gun, even though they're not paying attention. Things come out and go back in. They put it in their holster. They dig a hole with their feet because they're going to stand absolutely still. Then they hold
Yeah.
their breath. And if you ask them if they're ready, they say, I guess so. That's their preparatory cues. Did that hurt? It seemed like I hit home on that one.
Right in the feels, man.
I know. And I've been that guy too, right? We've all been that guy, because that's the lack of getting ready in a meaningful manner for what you're about to do. And if you like a lot of challenge, you've got to really up it. Otherwise, you're disassociative. You don't pay attention. And if you only like a little bit of challenge, you've got to really manage it so it doesn't overwhelm you, you know? And as instructors, that's something we should be teaching. And as shooters, we should be doing ourselves every time we step up to line. And what a great comfort it is to just to be able to perform your current level of skill on demand. That's all we're asking for. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Man. Yeah, I can't wait for that. I can't wait for that. I'm going to I'm gonna book a ticket as soon as I get out of here. So, like, I'm not even
Good.
kidding. Like, both of
Yeah.
these classes, because you're right. Um, as long as I've been doing this stuff, and as long as I've been, learning under others, it seems like it's one of those things that just gets taken for granted. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
not just the preparatory cueing. Like I think the idea is that you're gonna see the crackhead before he tries to rob you.
Yeah.
And what we learn from, surveillance footage and badge cam
Mhm.
is that that's not always the case, So, um, and then
It's
also the
much
safety
worse.
rules.
You might know them. That's what the statistics say. You might actually know the person you have to shoot. Nobody thinks about that. And they may look just like you, or they may be somebody younger, older. There's no telling, and if the brain has never thought about it, it's hard to do it under pressure.
That's true. That makes sense.
Mhm.
That makes so much sense.
Yep.
So, speaking of pressure, in a couple of weeks, a couple of weeks, we have the inner game of shooting coming to Memphis,
Mhm.
Tennessee, and that's going to be, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to be March 1st and 2nd. That's a Saturday and a Sunday. Um, I have my ticket, and
Good.
I absolutely cannot wait to learn again. From my perspective, this is one of those classes that, like, as often as you feel led to honor us with your presence, um, I'm going to try to be there every single time.
Good.
Even if it's just to sweep brass and hang targets, because just the teaching style and the coaching that you provide is so incredibly valuable. So,
Thank you.
so
The thing I noticed too, and one of the reasons the inner game of shooting came around, John Hopman asked me a great question, the founder of Philster, and he's an incredibly bright guy. He's probably somewhat of the Elon Musk of the firearms industry of holster making. He asked me, what would you teach if you were allowed to teach anything you wanted to? That's a great question if you wanted to. So I made the whole deliberate coaching class and I got done. I was like, John, what do you think? And he was like, that's great, but I don't care about coaching. So then I was like, all right, we need one just for the shooter. And I see it especially in shooters that are on the edge of burnout. They've ground themselves into dust, and they've been led to believe that endless negative repetitions and the pursuit of failure will get them to the next level. And there is a joy in martial uh, activities for human beings because they say there's only two activities for a human, um, and all sports are based on them: hunting or war. So basketball is hunting, boxing is war, football is hunting. If you cooperate with somebody else and aim at something, you're hunting. If you cooperate and aim at somebody else, you're fighting. And the brain needs this activity. And shooting is something that we all can really enjoy and appreciate at a deep level. It satiates a very primitive part of our brain to aim at something. And it's important for us to do it. So this class is for the shooter so that they can. I should have called it the inner joy of shooting, but it's hard enough with the inner game. And this came about because I read the inner game of tennis when I was a young coach, probably early 80s. And there was no coaching manuals. There was nothing available back then. And I read it and it changed the direction of my life because it didn't emphasize technical coaching. It emphasized experiential for the athlete. And I watched a man teach somebody tennis in 3 hours because he got them to play instead of to work. And that's what this class is about. Hey, Jimmy, it's a great book. Yep, good
yeah,
stuff. But these ideas change our direction and allow us to move forward. And that's, I've always said if I lose my passion for this, I'm done. I'm not coming to class. I just can't wait to be on the range with you guys and spend time because we're working together towards the pursuit of success instead of following up with failure constantly.
yeah. I was there for last year's inner game of shooting
Mhm.
class, and just the amount of breakthroughs that we were able to see.
Mhm.
Um, it's mind blowing. Like I'm talking, you have folks there that have been shooting all their lives, right? And
Mhm.
we that's turned into almost a joke in our community.
Mhm.
But there were times where there were even folks that have been to multiple classes over the years.
Mhm.
And they've had multiple coaches, but it wasn't that they needed someone to tell them something. They needed someone to ask the right question and for them to think about what that was, to really explore that. And your class gave them that.
It's interesting because the only constant in your gunfight or your match, there's only one constant. There's only one thing you can utterly count on, and that's you. You're the only one that's going to be there, we know for sure, at your gunfight. Somebody else will probably come, maybe somebody else's, a couple more of them. Same thing at your match. But the idea of exploring the shooter instead of exploring the bad guy or exploring the technique, and all that's important. I'm not taking it away, but getting people to think about how they work and what they're capable of is been one of the greatest pleasures of my life because I watch people have very little to do with it. I just have to ask the right question and I have to let them be free. And they start becoming themselves and they stop criticizing themselves and start living, which is two very different things. Most people have my one of my coaches calls it the itty bitty crappy committee that lives upstairs, that's always talking to you and criticizing you. And what a freeing thing it is for humans to be comfortable in their own skin, to be able to perform at their highest level, and to be a better version of themselves on a daily basis.
That's always really cool.
Yeah.
Um, is it so related question.
Yeah.
The When it comes to a lot of firearms instructors in the community, it's very much threat focused instead of very,
Mhm.
student focused. And I think a lot of that has to do with the idea that, when it comes down to defensive situations, the stakes are very high. Um, I think it may also have to do with the idea that, um, so maybe that's where they feel that their strengths lie as far as teaching is concerned. But I've never really understood the idea of, you know, I mean, I get it. Learn as much about the threat as you possibly can, and that makes sense. But knowing yourself as well, or if not more than knowing the threat, like, isn't that where the real battle lies? Like, what do you think about that, and where can we as an industry improve?
I think two things are big. Preferential models have been the mainstay of coaching in firearms. So because I do it this way and my fight was this way, your fight will be the same thing and you should do it the same way. That's all athletes tend to do that. That's why they become very poor coaches later in life. Like Wayne Gretzky was not a good coach. He was a great hockey player, but not a great coach, right? When we see that over and over. The preferential model is what gets in the way. I prefer to do something this way, so you should too. But it's not always the truth of the matter. And, we had the greatest mind working on what the threat looks like in William April. And those videos are still available for you. So you can simply watch those, be educated, and kind of know. But you're the problem because we're not 100% sure how you're going to act, especially good people that are conscientious that haven't faced a threat before. We have to get them ready for the idea that they are sufficient to the task. It can be very simple for them. So how do we build that person into a better version of themselves that has the advantage over their emotions enough not to make the fight worse, not to pursue somebody when they don't have to, not to keep shooting when they need to. It's a lot of emotional controls of go signals and no go signals, and to teach it. And I think there's a couple people that do a really good job at this. John Holshin, John Hearn are exceptionally good. Steve Tarani, people that really they think about this question quite a bit. And if you ever ask them, they'll say, "Well, I don't know for sure." And that's always a good sign from an instructor, the uncertainty, because the higher you get in any activity, the more uncertain you become. If you have a quick answer, usually it's something that's you just say as a soothing thing over and over. Like we hear, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. So, I was a knife instructor for a long time. That's a ludicrous statement. Don't bring a knife to a long range gunfight is what it should be, right? You know, but up close,
Yeah.
knives are just as dangerous. So are baseball bats. Everything's very dangerous. And so we want to get away from preferential models, which martial arts got stuck in for a long time. The thing that really changed that was the UFC. we know how people kick and punch. We know how they wrestle. We know how they fight. And there's a lot of versions of the best way for you to win your fight. So what is your background? What is your bias as an instructor? And then what is your goal? Is it to be right, or is it to improve your shooter? It's two very different things. So it's difficult. We always have to be asking ourselves, how can I improve as an instructor? Just like we ask our students to do that.
Absolutely. Hmm. One last
Not that I haven't
question
thought about that
before.
for a while.
Okay, I couldn't tell. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
but but yeah. So as far as and this might be blending a little bit into deliberate coaching, but
Mhm.
um, I find that the biggest issue that not just with myself, but several other instructors in the industry ends up being managing our own egos and having those egos collide with the goals of the student. Like,
Yeah.
just to give you a super specific example, you may see instructors that say, "Hey, my method works because this guy does it well, and this guy can do the thing." But you know that like, why do we lean that way when it seems that it's more productive for the student to understand that they want to exercise and then come across those principles and be able to do the thing themselves with their own technique. So uh, it's not really geared towards any particular, system or school or body or whatever have you. But like, I just want to pick your brain about, what have you seen as far as like, well, really, what advice can you provide about how to manage our own egos and a student in the center of our focus of our goals?
Yeah, it's difficult because you've got to be the showman too. You have to conduct the class. You have to stand in front of the class, and it can be ego feeding. Because people said, "Oh, it was great. Thank you. You improved me so much." But there's nothing wrong with being competent and masterful. They're two very different things in the ego driven. And, as much as I look at my past, I can see how many times I've changed. Like, here's a simple question: how many grips have you had on a firearm in your life
Oh my
that
God.
you've changed? Yeah. So it can't be constant. It's not the thing. And then people will address it and they say, well, this is a path, not the path. But what we're really looking for is the path for the student in front of us. I have big hands and I shoot a big gun. And so
Yeah.
somebody with small hands and a little gun, I have to really address them differently. And what I found is if we give them a chance to experience that, the instructor also has experienced it. And then you should be seeing how many people you can teach, especially the hardest ones to teach, not the easy ones. A lot of people show up in class, they're pretty good shooters already, and you can take credit for that, but it's not really your work. But if I can take somebody who didn't believe they can call shots and they can start seeing the immediate replay of their actions, and then I see them get better, which you saw in class, it happens, then that can keep us on the humble path of always building the student. And then the real problem is, what if they get better than you? How are you really going to react to that? Because there's an apprenticeship program. That's the way we taught craftsmen and master craftsmen for forever. And it was take somebody in your wing, get them better, teach them the rules, give them enough space where they can make their mistakes and you can help them. And eventually, when they outgrow you, you have two choices. And your choice is this: tell them they're good and they can move on and they've got all the skills they need, or tell them they're wrong and fight them. Either way, they get better. And that's what I still see in a lot of this. And it was horrible in the martial arts world too. The ego, the person that wants to be up front sometimes is feeding their need for attention. But to be a good instructor, you should be more of a reader of people, a communicator. You need to be able to put yourself in their place instead of them in your place.
Fantastic. Wow. To
It's
put
tough,
myself in
man.
their place.
Yeah, it's tough.
That's
So like you're fast. I've seen you shoot. You got a lot of speed. It's kind of uncontrollable sometimes for you. So you have inconsistent methodologies. It's not where you want all the time. And I'm sure you've
yeah.
been told to slow down and get your hits, and that didn't work. But people will still keep doing that because that's somebody who's coming from their side. That's somebody who shoots slowly because they believe information's more important than time. The fast person believes.
Uh-oh. I think I lost him. Let's see. Hey, Brian, can you hear me okay? Uh-oh. I think I lost him. Oh, boy. Let's see. Let me see if I can hit him up.
Hey, you're back.
There we go. All righty. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, yeah. It just went to both phases buffering on both of us. So,
Oh, man. So thanks a
yeah.
bunch for being patient with me.
No, it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
So let's see. Where we left off
Hey, can I
was,
talk about what just happened too? So, for
yeah,
an instructor, watch for when things go wrong to see who they really are. That's the
yeah.
real key in all this. So, you and I, we calmly sat through this. We didn't lose our minds. So, patience is important to us. Consistency. What was the first words that came out of your mouth? Thanks for being patient with me. See, that's the kind of things we're trying to build in other people too. And we have to draw instructors that's more important than their war stories or the police stories or their, the world championship. Can they communicate these? Can they get other people to do it? And in the sport world, we know that B athletes, not A athletes, are often better coaches because they have to find a way to make it work for them, even though they're not very good at it. So well done. Thanks for demonstrating all that.
Well, thanks a bunch. Yeah. Um, wow. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah. Man, that's awesome. That's awesome stuff. Wow. Thank you. All right. So uh, we do have a couple of different comments that we need to catch up on. So Dr. Jimmy Turner, who is hosting, uh, he's hosting Deliberate Coaching next month at Cahutta Pines. We're going to talk about that here in just a second.
Yeah.
Effectively applied in emotional intelligence. This is important. This is important
Mhm.
because Dr. Jimmy, um, he's a PhD and his dissertation was on emotional intelligence. And so that's his main thing. And in relation to firearms, like he coaches people on emotional intelligence. And so I think he's even starting up a program to help firearms instructors to build their emotional intelligence. And so I'm really excited for that program.
Good. That'll be
Yeah.
wonderful. We need that work.
So we really do. We really, really do. Um, so hey guys, just got here. I had no idea what was under all that beard, Brian. So that's going to be really fun. So
A little bit
that's
ugly,
Will
wasn't
Workman.
it?
Will Workman's pretty awesome. And also Dr.
Yeah.
Jimmy has a
Yeah, buddy.
question, and hopefully we can answer this question for him.
Okay.
How can an instructor diagnose their bias to
Uh-oh.
improve?
It's I just talked about this with Claude Warner, and he thought my approach was interesting. So how do you see your own bias? That's really difficult. You can say I don't have a normalcy bias, but we all do, you know. And so what I tend to do is look for the things that I avoid on a daily basis. Whatever I don't want to do is usually where my bias starts to live. So kind of like a black hole in the universe, we know it's there because it bends light around it. Things that I'm unwilling to do, I don't want to talk about, I don't think are important, they make me uncomfortable, tends to be where my bias lives. And if I see myself getting angry if somebody asks me about it, it strikes a chord with me, something like that. That's how you start diagnosing where your bias is. I'm like, it's hard to tell where I come from, which world. Like, am I a performance guy? Am I a tactical guy? What do I do? I got to be good at all of it. I'm a generalist overall because that's what instructors need to be. You can be a specialist if you're a competitor. Um, so, my bias really is high level performance. And I know one of my greatest bias is I don't respect people that don't want to do the work. It's very difficult for me, a lifetime of discipline. But I have to put myself, that's a bias, because I've put aside a large portion of my life to pursue the things I wanted to. So that's a sacrifice. And I can't hold it against you because you have a healthier life probably in total than I do by doing a more balanced approach, being a generalist. So I look for these areas where I'm not good enough. I can feel it. You feel it when you teach class. Somebody asks you a question, but like, yeah, yeah, and you just want to move on. Your class is dominated by accuracy only drills or by speed only drills. There's no performance in the class. Maybe there's no test on demand. Maybe you don't actually demonstrate in front of people. You don't work on your art of speaking and communicating effectively, or the words you choose, or the ideas that flow from you, or you stop learning, which is the big one. You got it all. There's nothing more to do. So it's hard to see your own bias because we are blind to it.
Hmm. We are kind of blind to it. We
Yeah.
no kinda. We are blind to it.
Yeah. Having good
So
friends
pretty
you can
interesting.
ask too, but you got to find your truth speaker, not your buddy. You know the difference. Buddies, yeah, all right, that's great. But I have a truth speaker who tells me the absolute truth. AJ Zito, I could call and I'd say, hey, bro, here's what's going on. Tell me what you think it is. And he'll tell me the truth either way. you know Adam Winch is the same way. I'm very lucky to have some really good friends in my community and I run ideas past them. I was like, am I nuts? Here's what I'm seeing, have you seen this too? And the scientific method helps a lot. You observe, you formulate a hypothesis, you seek to falsify it, see if it doesn't work. But most people formulate a hypothesis and decide to make it work anyway, and they look for the echo chamber. So I'm looking for the unique, outstanding, different people that have really good questions and answers, and that's another great way to find our bias. We got to be, we're all peers. Doesn't matter how many classes you teach or how often. If you're a teacher, we're all peers in that moment. And we can learn from everybody. But sometimes somebody has a novel way of looking at things, and you go, "Wow, that's great." I taught with Adam Winch in a rifle class, and he's given me a couple things that will live rent free in my mind for the rest of my life because they work. And I will give him credit, like all people do, maybe 3 times. And then after that, I have kleptomnesia because then it was my idea. But that's how we grow, you know?
Yeah. Uh, Before we run out of time, we should probably talk
Yep.
about the deliberate coaching class, and I believe that is in May. Um, I have the pleasure of being out to the Dr. Jimmy's class twice in May. I'm going to be teaching
Nice.
my own IDPA mastery class at the
Cool.
the first weekend, and then also I think the last weekend in May I'll be coming back out for your deliberate coaching class. So, can you give me a little bit of input on what I can expect and what kind of heart I need to bring for that class?
So it's a very different class because instead of a technical curriculum driven class, it is an actual coaching class. So you will be the head coach of one shooter in that class for the duration of 3 days. It's your job to get them to the next phase and find the other instructors in the class that can help them improve their shooting. Then you will also rotate through the class and work with everybody while you're being managed by me and possibly whoever's with me to AI. So you get a chance to coach instead of to learn my curriculum. And then we work on the inside of gathering data, uh, teaching proper techniques that allow people to experience shooting so they can do it on demand, and constantly building drills that are not just say, here's how I do it, but here's how you experience it. It is a very unique course in that way. I'm teaching two of them coming up next 2 weeks. And it's something I really enjoy because, there's a lot of good programs that teach you curriculum, and they say, well, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do that. But that doesn't teach you how to coach. That gives you a good framework to be supported inside of. But in martial arts, we learned that it becomes very stagnant very quick unless you get a chance to really experience it. And I don't want you to have to do all your learning on the job. I'd like you to do a little bit of learning while you have a safety net, and then I can pose good questions to you and see what worked. And just as importantly, I can congratulate you when you do something really well, and then also take it from you. Now, it is a shooting class. There are shooting standards because I think every instructor needs to have a competent level. Um, but I offer a unique experience in that because if you don't shoot the standards, you get coached over and choose another test to improve it and see if you can do it in class and improve it over a 3-day period. If you don't make the standards, you have 6 months to reshoot them at any time, as long as you do it on video or it's witnessed, and then you will pass the class. Because my goal is to get you to practice. What's the number one thing that firearms instructors always say? If you don't want to shoot, start teaching. And that's wrong. I shoot all the time. Doesn't have to be that way, but every shot counts, every practice counts. So I give them a chance to teach themselves to learn. And I've had some people fail the class, but I have not had one person that hasn't gone back and done the work and gotten better because they learn how to coach themselves, because your very first client is always you. And if you're not good enough to coach yourself, then you're going to have a hard time with other folks. And if you figure yourself out, then you got to figure all the different people in the world out. How do I relate to this? I see a lot of classes. Here's how to teach a certain group. And I'm going to tell you the truth. You know what the best way to teach a certain group is? Treat them with courtesy and respect and pursue success over everything else. And people dig that, you know. Sounds like something you've experienced in your life. I see the nod inside of that. And that's what deliberate coaching is. It's got 3 classroom sessions and 3 range sessions, and you get to practice, which is really odd. I'm going to give you free time to practice. Like, you'll have coaching sessions, and then you will simply step up to the line and practice, because you need to play at shooting a little bit to get better at it. I don't use that word dismissively. I know it's deadly serious, but you need to experiment. You need to explore. You need to speculate. That's the only way you're going to get better. And you need to do it while there's somebody there that can watch you, because I'll tell you a true bias that exists in the world. If you're not coached, you're missing 25% of your potential. And I didn't make that number up. It came from the Olympic Training Center. Uncoached athletes are 25% worse performers than they could be. Man, I wish I had a money market account that would give me 25% interest. And what we're offering you in deliberate coaching is 25% interest on you, how you can be a better person. And I have people take this class over and over again because it connects with that need to be a better coach, not a better technician, not a curriculum provider, but how can I reach all these different type of people? And I hope to influence the industry in a positive way, so that there's a chance for people to learn how to, which is very different sometimes, to mentor people, to grow adults, to help them become better shooters.
Wow. Yeah,
That was good. Wait. Can we write that down?
We got to record it. That's amazing. Yeah. We do have some questions before we get out of here. Sure. So Will Workman of Workman Protection, he asked, do you all have any advice for finding your specialty as an instructor? Wow. Yeah.
So, there's people usually want to specialize around the technique or the gun. I'm a pistol optic shooter. There's my wife checking in. All right. I'm a rifle shooter. Okay. Hi, honey. I'm this, I'm that. But the real specialty is, what do you do? So, like Dr. Jimmy's going to do a class in his real specialty, which is a very broad one. It's like, how can you improve your EQ and not worry about your IQ as much? Get to the position of what you're good. I know Will, he's a good communicator. What is his specialty? It's something that you have a lot of experience in. It's a lane that you well developed, that you've seen other instructors in. Not everybody needs to be a rifle instructor and a jiu-jitsu guy and, a pistol guy. It's all right. If you're going to teach the armed citizen, name the 3 things they have to have. I can name it right off the top of my head as an instructor, 3 things that the armed citizen has to have as a shooter. First of all, they have to have a good draw. Needs to be consistent, because it's going to come from concealment. That's their huge advantage. They need to be able to put an accurate fire on the target first, which seems to be a principle of war. Von Clausewitz talked about it. I'm sure every general has ever talked about it. Whoever hits the other person first tends to win. And then they need to do follow-up actions. Does anybody else need shooting? Is there anything else I need to do? Do I need to move to cover? Do I need to do another thing? And that's how you start developing your specialty, and it'll grow. And the longer you do it, think of it as a pie. You're going around it, and you're going to fill it all in. You're going to fill the circle in of now I need a little legal training, now I need a little medical training, and then you become an audit system where you can refer other people. Like it was very common in martial arts. Some people are just good at certain things. So I'd take one of my fighters and say, hey, you're going to go train with so and so for a while until you get his stuff. So develop that specialty according to your skill sets, your training, your experience, and what's good at. And it can be very simple, you know. We don't all have to look alike because I'm doing something that's very different. And to answer this question just a little bit more, a friend of mine just asked me, he's like, how do you get these other contracts? Because I've done some police and military contracts. I said, I'm offering them something they don't have. And so the problem with you is you look and smell like them. They got a whole bunch of you already. So what can you do unique and novel, and what great questions can you start answering? So you should have 2 or 3 questions as an instructor that light your fire and that you want to pursue and that you want to get good at. We need beginning instructors more than anything in the industry. We don't need a bunch more national instructors. We need people that'll do the work and take that person that's never shot before and give them the gift of loving to shoot.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
Will. We got a couple more questions rolling in. So Joseph had a really good question. What is a good cold drill to assess intermediate students?
Good. Great question. So a good cold drill is something that you understand exclusively. So if are you pressing for accuracy? If it's accuracy and precision, something like a bullseye, what we used for my beginning students was 10 rounds at 7 yards, no time. That would be a beginner. An intermediate modification would be maybe 10 rounds in 10 seconds. And then an advanced one might be from the draw 10 rounds so we're building that up in an accuracy and precision. There's some time in it, but mostly it's an informational drill. If it's a speed drill, we want to get them out of the holster and on target. That's great for them too. My cold assessment drill for most people is multiple targets. So I want you to draw and fire one or two shots in each of those targets. And just to see how well they do that, can they move from one target to the next? Can they hit that target? Can they hit a smaller target? At what speed do they work at? Because that's really a performance drill. Speed would be purely time. Performance drill would be information and time put together. That's the best cold drills that exist. If you do any one of them too long, you'll grow disenchanted with it. Like build drills were a big deal for a while. Everybody's kind of over build drills because we needed to do them in order to learn the process. Here's the big question I'll ask you though. What's the unintended consequence of your cold drill? Because no matter what you teach, you're also harming a student at the same time.
Oh, wow.
You are.
I
There's
hadn't
no
thought of it
drill in the
that
world
way.
that's completely perfect. So what is the unintended consequence? And I tell them, like, hey, listen, you're going to do a bill drill, and I'd like you to be able to do 6 shots in 4 seconds on the target. And, an exceptional person would be able to do it in 3 seconds, and a master level shooter would be able to do it in 2 seconds. But the unintended consequence of a bill drill is to shoot in an automated manner without consequence to having to stop relative to the target. That's how you choose your drills. And it's hard. I have 4 tests for a reason in my class because you can't just have one. Great question. Thank you. Got some
Wow.
sharp
Yeah.
people on the show, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks again, Joseph. Yeah. So we have
Mhm.
another question coming in from Tracy. And what are your thoughts on using the Mantis or Ace/MetaQuest as a training tool for dry fire versus just using your EDC firearm?
Good question. So I'm going to lay practice out like this. The reason that people don't practice is it's not easy enough. It's not accessible. You need to set up something. So if Mantis or Ace or whatever sets up an area, and that's what they tend to do, is you have a SIRT pistol or you have, like I have a Blackbeard in my rifle. I tend to practice with that more because I can simply pick it up and do it. There's no uh, all this stuff I have to do to get ready. The other thing in training is it needs to be novel. If you do the same thing over and over expecting a better result, you'll get worse over time. So you need novelty in it and complexity. Those systems offer novelty and complexity. And people also that spend money on things tend to invest back in themselves because they don't want to waste it. So it's a great way for them to do it. Uh, at some point, you may outgrow it, and that's great. You've learned everything you need from it. Like I do almost all my practice still with just a pistol. but that's because I'm visualizing what I need to do. Occasionally I find something and I really like it and I spend some time with it and I grow. But anything that'll get you to practice wins, you know. But are there unintended consequences? We know the brain doesn't react to virtual training exactly like it does experiential training. So just realize that, you know. Mantis, if you get so good at your draw, you may be able to outdraw it. So just consider that a win. Those are all things that happen to people. Um, it emphasizes accuracy over performance sometimes. That's how it is. Just look at the drill, enjoy it, and God bless you if you'll train even 2 or 3 times a week for 5 minutes is all you really need as long as you're truly present. If you'll do that, you'll get better. And, I know you started working out. So, cert pistol in between sets can give you hundreds of repetitions while you're recovering. So, yes, please use anything that appeals to you. And I don't find a whole lot of damaging stuff anymore. I know Manus has worked very hard. I know Ace has worked very hard. And I know us dry fire trainers have worked on good curriculums for it. It's a lot like fitness. Sometimes it fits, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you outgrow it, sometimes you need it. So, yes, please, please. Anything will get you going.
Yeah, absolutely. Shelley is amazing. The indispensable organization wizard.
That poor woman has to live with this nonsense all the time. And it is, I'm very fortunate to have found a soulmate that can put up with this. I'm just an incredibly driven, intense human being all the time. And this is all I do is think about things. And she brings light and joy into my life. And I appreciate her for that.
Yeah.
So
She's
true.
amazing.
She is.
Yeah. So we got about, I don't know, 9 or 10 minutes left
Yep.
on this thing. It's coming up to the end of the hour. This is a question that I borrowed from Jeremy Gill, who does the After Action Project podcast.
Mhm.
What questions have I asked that I didn't?
So, we talked about practice. We talked about classes. Let's talk about what motivates people. All right. I'm going to
Yeah.
give everybody a brief idea of how your brain works under pressure. Procrastination is a real thing because you're trying to compress time to get started. So you want more challenge in your training. But the real problem is if you don't do something for at least 90 days, you never get momentum. We work a lot like the physical laws. So it takes about 90 days for us to change. And then the discipline becomes easier after that. You don't have to train hard, you have to train well. There's a very big difference in it. And there should be 5 reasons that you train, and these are called the intrinsic motivators. Number one, whatever you're doing, you should have passion for it. If you're losing your passion, ask yourself why. It's a you thing. It's not anything else. You don't need a new thing. You need to think about it. We all lose our passion a little bit, and oftentimes that's when we're just about to grow. We tend to contract and fall back a little bit, so we have to get better. You have to be curious, constantly insatiably curious. One reason that your dry fire doesn't work is when you shoot, you call everything a hit. You're not curious enough about how sights really work under pressure, and did I really see what I thought I saw? The next thing is it's got to be your own idea. Don't do it because uh, Memphis said so. Don't do it because Brian Hill said so. Just do it because you want to get better and you want to be a better version of yourself. That is essential to whatever you pick up. And if you're done with it, you can simply do a Brian Enos and disappear and send everybody a Zen quote once a week. All right. And you move on to your next thing. No, it's not for the rest of your life, but be intent and thoughtful while you do it. All right. You should seek mastery. Even though you may never be a master, we're still seeking it. The Japanese call it shibumi, which means effortless perfection. You're seeking effortless perfection in what you do. Even though it's not attainable, we need that kind of craftsman's journey to it. Okay. It's very important as we move forward. These things motivate human beings at a different level. Having the passion. And then the final thing is the purpose. Why do you train? You have to know this. If you carry a gun on a daily basis, that means that Maybe you're on a church security detail, which may be the hardest job that's ever existed, because if anything ever truly happens, you're going to be with all the people you love and care about, and they're not going to be sure what to do. Do you carry it on a daily basis because you want to be present and protect and hold the bad guys of the world at bay? Or you want to get home to your family because they love you and they care about you? Find the purpose. What drives you? What gets you up every day? For me, the purpose was I came out of a very bad household. I was a mess as a human being, and I felt like I wanted to help people get better because I know what it feels like to be a mess. I know what it feels like to be a catastrophe, and it happens occasionally. But find your purpose in this training. And when you do, those 5 things keep human beings at a level of effortlessness that's you never experienced. It's a lightness of being. Every day is a gift. Have deep gratitude for what you're doing, and really, really enjoy it. How's that?
That's beautiful. Wow. That was,
It is.
wow. That's, that's a great place to end it,
It
because I don't
is.
know how we could follow that up. But before I let you go, I just want to say that, it's an absolute honor every time I get an opportunity to, to pick your brain and to listen to you. Thank you so much for being my friend, for being my coach, for being my mentor. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you for spending time with me. That's the greatest gift of all. People always say I learn as much from my students, but it's the great gift of sharing this journey that so few of us really embark upon, you know, and it's a singular event, but when we can do it as a group, I so appreciate it. And you came out and helped me last time, and it's a hard, lonely job sometimes. So it's wonderful to have people that spend time with me in a meaningful manner. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. And if you're still with us, if you're listening, or if you're watching this, if you're listening via podcast, I just want to say thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Hmm.
We do realize that your time is very valuable, and you could have been using it to spend with your family or to do work, but you're spending it with us. And we just wanted to let you know how much we appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. Thank you, Brian. And as always, welcome to Memphis.